afternoon. At the tone, Pacific Daylight Time will be 5, 4, and 30 seconds.
What? Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can you feel that? Yes, I sure can. Okay, this is interesting. There go the lights. Oh.
We are here at the Scotts Valley Library with Sam and Linda Hardman. It is the 25th of September, 2019, and we are here to talk about the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Happy to be here.
Can you start by telling me what your relationship with Santa Cruz is?
Lived here in Santa Cruz County. I moved here when I was 19. I think from 1979 until 2003. We moved to Tehachapi after that. But in 1989 we were here, and I was working at Rose Hill Systems on Scotts Valley Drive. He worked.
Well, I moved here in about 82 and been in and out of the area for a couple of years and then settled down and lived here until about 2001. So we were here through the quake.
2003.
I was working up in Menlo Park at the time of the
We
quake.
moved together.
We got married in
87.
87.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were newlyweds for the quake.
So, tell me your earthquake story.
October 17th was my 30th birthday.
Oh.
That was insult to injury, or injury to insult, right? And I had asked for the day off, and I didn't get it. I wanted to go to the World Series, but I couldn't get tickets. And so, but my boss at Rose Hill gave me a half hour off so I can go home and watch the game, right? So I'm sitting at my desk down here, and we usually get a UPS truck in at about 5 o'clock every day to pick up. We make computer systems, custom computer systems. And the table started to vibrate. And I thought, it's a big truck today. And it kept vibrating, and I watched my pencil vibrate right across the desk, and I went, that's a really big truck today. And then that's when the secondary waves hit. And all the pictures in unison flew off the south wall and hit the north wall of the office. And the office was a little bigger than this. I watched a 500-pound metal file cabinet walk into the center of the room. There were computer monitors flying, chairs rolling everywhere. It felt like somebody had put the building on a 4x4 furniture dolly and pushed it down a rocky hill, right? And I started to head towards the door. I was on the second floor of the building. And what stopped me is the swinging glass door. It was swinging open and shut, open and shut. And I went, nah, I think I'll stay right here. And grabbed hold of the handrails because I had to go down a little hallway. And that's where I read out the quake.
Wow.
And when it stopped, it was just dead quiet. You hear tinkles of things finishing, falling, or whatever. And I did a rebel yell. my friends still remind me. It was me in the upstairs going, yee-haw. It was mainly because I was still alive. I made it. And we went out, and there were water cooler. It was a mess. There were water cooler, water all over the floor. Everybody headed towards the door. And as we're going down the little wooden stairs out, the first of the aftershocks hit.
Oh, wow.
And we all kind of congregated out. What we didn't know is downstairs our shipping clerk, I'm trying to remember her name, she had broken her leg. So all the boxes down in the storage room where we ship out from had fallen over, and she was under there. She had broken her leg trying to get out from under all that. So she's one of the injuries. We watched, there was a cliffside where it's Bear Cliff over here. We watched a landslide come down that as we were standing there when we ran out the building. There was dust everywhere as it crumbled. We were just hugging each other. And I told my boss, I'm leaving. And I had a daughter in after school care down by Vine Hill School. She was 7 years old. Her name is Angie, and I took off down there. One of the first things I noticed is smoke. Not here in Scotts Valley, but when we looked down in Santa Cruz, you could see little pillars of smoke start to come up from various places. I remember trying to drive down Scotts Valley Boulevard, and there were a couple of cars I had to dodge out of the way because they were panicking. They were on the wrong side of the road, and you're thinking, okay, people, calm down, right? It's a quake, you're okay, stay on your side of the road. But people were freaked and they were panicking. So I got to the daycare down there, and it had a brick facade, and in front of the building, when I pulled up, the bricks were down in the yard, which scared me. And I went inside and I had to shove the door open because a bookshelf had fallen in front of it, which scared me because my kid's in there, right? And I looked around and there was just, kid furniture and everything just strewn all over, overturned. And one daycare worker, and I asked her, I said, "Where's my daughter?" And she just looked at me and said, "Daughter." She was like in shock. "Daughter, where are the children?" And she was, "Children?" And I went, "Yes, where are they?" "Oh, backyard." And I went, "Thank you." Because I was lifting bookshelves looking for my kid. I went back there, and there all the kids were. And so I got my child, and I checked on, is everybody okay? And they were like, yeah, they were all shaking. And we got in the car. And then we started to head home. And a lot of freaked out people. We went carefully. We got down, I lived in Boulder Creek. My house was a corner house on Pine Street in Big Basin Way, which is now owned by somebody else, and they have restored. At the time it was pre-restoral, so it was all pretty old. It was an old Queen Anne house. And we started making our way home. And one of the first things we noticed was the bridge, the overpass over Zayante Creek there, was raised about 6 inches from the road, which seemed counterintuitive to me, right? You would think a bridge would fall down or something, but it had been thrown up and stayed there. And there was a car in front of me, I believe it was a little VW. They had stopped, and a couple other cars were slowing down because we all saw the same thing. And looking at each other, do we go? The bug went first. He made it across. We went after him. And the same thing with the twin bridges on Highway 9 down there. They were all raised about like this. There were compression wrinkles on the road. I was mentioning that. You would think cracks would open up, right? But these were compression wrinkles. And it looked like fabric that had cords going underneath, like little worms had crawled under the road and raised it up in different places. I went into geology and studied geology later, but this is from the compression waves, right? And you don't think about this stuff in the beginning. And when I got home, it took about an hour because there's traffic, there's emergency vehicles going all over the place. And so it took us about an hour, and we were driving careful. We finally got home, and my sister-in-law was there, who was living with us at the time with her daughter. And her daughter was running around naked in the yard. And she was sitting on the back stairs going, "Don't go in there." And she had apparently been giving her daughter a bath and when the quake hit. And she grabbed her daughter, pulled her on the floor, and covered her until it stopped. Then she grabbed her and went outside. And she didn't realize still her daughter was running around naked. She was so freaked out. So we got Allison clothes. She was only 2 or 3 years old. The house was a wreck. I remember I just bought a first complete set of china I ever owned. And I had put it on the south-facing hutch in the dining room. And I was so proud of it. I'd had it for 3 weeks. Half of it was on the floor, broken, right? Now, on the other side of the wall in the kitchen, where we keep the kids' Melmac and everyday wear, not a thing had moved. The south-facing wall in the kitchen, however, we had a large microwave, and it had been thrown across the kitchen. It's about a 10-foot, that was a big kitchen, about a 10-foot toss. And it landed on a 5-pound can of coffee, and it exploded all over the kitchen. And then there was just, bureaus overturned and things. There were cracks in the walls. There was glass everywhere, and there was no electricity. So I had an earthquake kit. I told you I was into geology. I'd been following Karen McNally's work. She had, when we had the pre-shock, we had 2 pre-shocks before that. And the second one, they had set up a seismograph along the San Andreas Fault, and they were picking up weird microquake activity that they hadn't known. And I looked at that, and I know how long it's been since they've been a quake there, and I went, we better get an emergency kit. So I had an emergency kit for about 3 months put together. And we had the tent, and we had the battery, and we just set up in the front yard. I had my daughter, and Allison was there. We had my sister-in-law, him and me, and we just had a campsite in our front yard for 3 days, and with blankets and radios and a cook stove, and until the power came back on, and we can go in and start cleaning up the glass in the house. So that's the initial quake. That's our first night we spent out there on my birthday. It was dark. I was still wearing my San Francisco Giant hat, and I realized I never did get to see the game. And dang it, it's my birthday. This isn't fair. So, and then he was at work.
Yeah.
Up in Menlo Park.
Yeah, when it hit at Menlo Park, I was walking on the second floor in a hallway at the office building I was at, and it was just spread your legs a little and just kind of ride the waves until it passed. I wasn't really aware of how much damage or how bad it was or anything. It just kind of riding it out in the hall, and there was one other person with me, and the two of us just kind of looked at each other as, wow. After it was over, I turned around and went into my office, and power was out and everything. And I said, well, I'm heading home. And I, locked my desk up and did whatever I needed to do to clean up, and got in my car and started driving home. Didn't see much in the way of signs of anything driving home. I went up to Skyline from Menlo Park and started driving down it. Once I got to about, I don't think it was until I got to Highway 9 and started coming from Skyline down Highway 9 that I started seeing some landslides, little hill slides. They didn't block the road, but they blocked half of the road so you could go around it. But there were people driving a little wild, and so I had to be real careful when I chose, because Highway 9's real windy, and where some of the slides were, going around them was at your own risk type of thing. But I got home okay, got to our house, and my sister was sitting on the back porch going, don't go in there, don't go in there.
She was still there.
She was obviously very rattled.
She was from Texas and had just moved out.
Yeah. And she decided she much prefers facing tornadoes and hurricanes than earthquakes.
Something for everyone.
That's it. Wherever you live, there's something. For me, that was really the extent of my earthquake experience, other than being grateful we had the earthquake kit on the back porch, which was in a travel carrier.
Yeah.
And so we just packed the travel carrier with the tent and the camping stove and all the stuff that you normally have when you camp. And that made our earthquake kit.
Which is really great, because you could just pick them up and put them on a car if you have to evacuate, flood, fire, whatever, or open it up like in the case of what happened. And so it's something our family, we've tried to keep an earthquake kit ever since.
Great.
They come in handy. Right now it's the RV. We call it the emergency backup house. It has a generator and everything. Kind of fussy about that. I like my emergency backup systems now.
That's good.
One of the things he brings up is communication and how the family was split up too. There wasn't a lot of cell phones. Some people had cell phones. They were clunky, they were big, and wealthy people had them. Most common people didn't have them at that point. So it was real hard to get, and the landlines didn't work. All the receivers had been knocked off the phones, and so I couldn't get a hold. I didn't know how he was. I have a son too who was staying with my first husband, his father, over in San Jose. He had gone down there to live for a month or two, and I was very upset. I couldn't get a hold of him. The phones weren't working. The first time we got an incoming phone call was that night, and it was somebody who was calling in long distance, and we could find, can you call him? Can you call them? Make sure they're okay. I don't know what happened. Are you okay? So that was, the first night was very tense because of that, just the communication breakdown. Being unable to even drive over, because I think there was a landslide on 17. We couldn't get that way, and we just decided to stay put. Even getting into the house to pick up the phone when it finally did ring was an adventure, because there were no lights, there was broken glass, and there were aftershocks, and that was the worst part, the aftershocks. Because you go in and it would start shaking, and it was like nature's bad joke. It was like, I'm going again, just kidding. And it would just put you on edge. I mean, put you on edge, and you'd be in there, should I get the phone? Is another aftershock or not? And you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
All my phones were all my phone numbers that I had from family and relatives were on my computer. So without power, I couldn't bring my computer up, and I had stopped trying to memorize phone numbers and whatnot, because I could just get them off the computer. And so until we had power up and I could access the phone numbers, I couldn't call anybody because I didn't know their numbers. It's different now. You can have them on your cell phone and whatnot, but back then on the computer was, I thought, smart. Live and learn.
So both of you mentioned communication, or I think you mentioned communication, and how did you acquire information during that time period? Not just
mostly from
talking
the radio.
to one another, but you used the radio.
Yeah. Also, when we got home, we got the batteries in the emergency kit. Put the batteries in the radio, and we sat out in front around the campfire, listening to the radio. Going, here's another aftershock, and so on and so forth. And we were quite taken back. We didn't realize how widespread. Because in your head, when you're going through it, it's just Santa Cruz, or it's just, must have been, a sixer, just right up here or something, and you didn't realize exactly how big it was and how many people it was affecting at that moment. People who were trapped. I mean, and of course there's the word of gossip. Since we lived in town in Boulder Creek, I could go down to the corner and they said, you hear what happened at the Pacific Garden Mall? No, there's people trapped in the coffee shop, and anybody I know. So you're frantically checking, and there's no verification. You know how gossip works. It's like Twitter now. There's no verification, so you don't know what you're hearing is true or not, or if it's somebody's panicked testimony. And so you're relying on the radio as much as you can, but a lot of the radio wasn't coming out of Santa Cruz. They were focused on what was going on in Oakland. They were the World Series, the marina, all that, and the fires in San Francisco. So it was almost harder to get information locally than it was the big picture.
Did either of you know the significance of the earthquake before you had heard stories on the radio?
No.
No.
I mean,
we knew
it was
back here.
was obvious that it was, because of the slides and whatnot, that it was something significant, but I really didn't know the size or how far it had traveled or anything. I didn't know where the epicenter was. I was listening to the radio as I was driving home in my car, so I had some updates and had a little bit of an idea that the Bay Area had been affected significantly, but I don't recall really grasping the Embarcadero and what was going on in San Francisco and Oakland areas really well until the power came back on and we were able to see TV reports. Even with the radios, they didn't do a great job of detailing how significant the issues were. I mean, when they said it was collapsed, you didn't realize how much had collapsed, and how many miles of that
It
road.
was 3 days before we saw television pictures and reports to really go, oh my, and, just glued. We're watching, I had family that had videotaped it for us so that we could watch it later because they knew that we were down. And we would get phone calls a couple of times a day to catch up, but that was pretty much it in the radio. We're glued to the radio.
Did the earthquake impact your life? And if so, how?
Yeah, in our yard for 3 days. Working was interesting. At 3 days, they called us back to work, and none of us wanted to leave our families. I found out later I had PTSD from the whole thing. So it was really, they had, I think it was like a Christmas parade. The first time I realized it, Christmas parade after the quake, and it was to kind of celebrate recovery and all this. And the fire engines started coming down the street, and they put their sirens on. And I immediately busted into tears and had no idea why I was crying. And it took several years to be able to listen to the sirens go and not cry. Finally put it together, why I was crying. It was like, why am I crying? Why am I crying? It's just a siren. Well, it's how it is. And then they called us back to work. Of course, we were all on edge. And we didn't want to be there, but we were there because we had to clean up there. And we understand business had to keep going. We had customers calling, going, where's my computer? So we had a large earthquake. I don't care. Just give me. It's like, okay. So we had to get back online. Our shipping clerk became a hero as she was wheeled back in a wheelchair with a broken leg. She gave her leg for the business, trying to save the computers, which didn't work, but poor thing. She recovered. Anytime anybody would come up and down the stairs, everybody would go like this because it would shake the building, Especially, there's a guy named Stewart. He was a big man, and he would run up the stairs, and the whole building would go like this, and everybody goes, stop that! So everybody's on edge. We also had issues. We had to wait for 17 to be reopened. There were transportation lines for business and all that. There was a lot of connecting with people. And in the beginning, we were kind of joking. We kind of watched it from our friend. The first day, everybody was overly nice. Community effort. At the time, Urbis was there, Urbis grocery store, and all their food, because their power was out too, they had a massive parking lot barbecue for the neighborhood. Well, we can't save it, so let's cook it up and feed everyone, right? And it was a wonderful community spirit. People were checking on each other. They had our little Red Cross station down the road. We had 3 houses on our street red tagged. We were one of the few houses on our street that wasn't red tagged. But they were giving coffee. And then at about day 3, things start to change. And we watched like 3 fist fights because they were having trouble getting gas in. There was a long line to get gas. Fist fights started breaking up. It was like the stress started to break. And you started hearing people yell at each other and things like this. And I think it was just everybody had PTSD, going through that. You go into any building, and any time an aftershock would hit everybody, you watch in a unison, they just go like this. And like, do I go for the door? I don't want to be the first one and look scared, but and they'd all stand up and then sit down at the same time when it ended. It just little things like that. My daughter, for a year, when she was at the daycare, for what I understand, she was in the backyard when it hit, but she was next to a big plate glass window. She said the window was doing this. She made me move her bed away from the window at the house because she could not sleep next to a window anymore. For a couple of weeks, she didn't want to sleep alone. The kids were affected. It took me 3 days to find my cat, who turned out was inside my mattress for 3 days. mattress. He had clawed up underneath, so we had to get a new mattress later. But just all those little things.
Yeah.
I mean, it affects me today. When I hear like the Ridgecrest quake, we felt that at our house. And it was like the old stuff, you just sit and you wait. And how bad is this going to be? And it all comes kind of flashing back. And being immediately concerned. We were lucky, we were about 50 miles away from that quake. So we got all the shaking, but none of the damage. But my heart immediately, I empathized with Ridgecrest because I felt like I have been there. Know what they're going through. So luckily our family members, of all our family members, nobody was physically hurt.
How long did it take, or do you feel like it took, to return to some normalcy?
It was easier for me, I think.
Yeah.
Working in Menlo Park at the building I worked at, there was no damage really. And so 2 or 3 days after the quake, I was back at work and doing same thing I did before the quake. Everything was pretty normal. The only major issue was construction on 9 as they were cleaning the slides up and that sort of stuff, which is not unlike when you get winter storms in the slides, so it wasn't that unusual. It was all back to normal, and but I didn't really experience any bad part in it, other than I was here.
Came home to all the freaking out people.
Yeah.
We had at home, I remember it was like a month later, we kept having the aftershocks. Like I said, that was the first part. If it had just stopped at the quake. But I mean, the first day, the first night, there were like 20 aftershocks that we could feel, some of them pretty strong. But even weeks later, I mean, like 3 weeks later, I get up in the morning and it was a routine to close all the cabinet doors again, because every morning they would be open. Every time an aftershock hit, it would throw. And I remember screaming at the cabinet ears, just stop it, stop it. It's kind of.
I remember watching my sister and Linda both, because they were much closer to what happened, and it was much more violent for them. And for a good while, both of them were unnerved at just any kind of bump in the night.
Big truck. Yeah, I know.
It wasn't necessarily an aftershock, but if it was a loud noise, it got their attention.
Yeah, for quite a while.
Yep.
Did either of you venture down into Pacific Garden Mall to see what the destruction looked like, or did you visit the
probably a week after or
tent
something like
stores?
that?
We waited.
We didn't go when they were actively doing things to stay out of the way.
Stay out of the way because we knew it was damaged.
At some point after, we went to see the damage.
2 days before that Sunday, they'd given me a surprise birthday party, which I told him not to do. I said, don't do that. And so he has it, so it's his fault. But he took me down to the Pacific Garden Mall while they were distracting me, while they were getting a party together. And that's why we would watch tapes later, because they were all these places we had just been standing 2 days before. We had just been in the coffee shop. We just went down to Ford's. We'd walk through there. I mean, what if we had been the ones in there? I mean, it's not that much time. It really puts you in that place. It could happen to anybody, anytime, anywhere. It's just fate who ends up where at the time it does happen.
What's it like to reflect on your experience 30 years later?
Well, we moved out of the Santa Cruz area about 20 years ago.
17 years ago.
17 years ago. So
nothing to do with the place.
coming back up here and just seeing it's like coming home, and thinking about from the earthquake perspective, for me, it's not just the earthquake, it's because of the slides and whatnot. I think of that. I look at the mountains and hills and that's what in the San Lorenzo Valley kind of is. I'm just more focused on that sort of geological thing. But as far as this whole area has changed so much, but then it remains the same in so many ways. It's kind of nice to come back.
When you see it, yeah, coming down the hill, like we drove down Scotts Valley yesterday. First thing I did was look for that hillside that collapsed in the quake, because it's still vivid. You know, it's like slow-mo when you play it in the memory. You know, I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I remember what I saw in those few minutes with the quake. You know, it's just like burned in there. And probably be telling those stories in the home when, you know, another 30 years. And yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add that we didn't cover?
The experience, you talk about the negative impacts of it, it also spurred me to go back to school and study geology. I'd always been fascinated with earthquakes, which is interesting. Since I felt my first one, I was raised in San Jose, born in San Jose, and I asked my mom what makes that, and she says, there's a crack in the ground. It's called the San Andreas. Someday there's going to be a big one. I said, well, where is that crack? I don't know, over there. I said, and it occurred to me as a child, somebody maybe should know where that crack is and keep tabs on it. See what it's doing, you know. And as a kid, even in high school, I was always checking out like earthquake books and, you know, where's that crack? What's it doing now? You know? And we'll call up UC Berkeley and plot. I had a whole like wall full. So finally, when I got time, I got out of high school and everything, and I still kept up the interest. I already had been watching, you know, microquakes and things going on, following Karen McNally's work down at UC Santa Cruz. I had noted and would often give a phone call to like UC Berkeley. There was a smell that had never been there before in the Zayante Creek. When you go over Mount Herman area, down Graham Hill over the Zayante Creek, for 3 months before, you started noticing a hydrogen sulfide smell, rotten eggs. Mm-hmm. And at first it was faint. Just before the quake, though, you couldn't go over that creek without going, what is that smell? And then right after the quake, it was just overwhelming. And then it dissipated and gone. So I reported that Opal Creek, 45 minutes before the quake, overflowed its banks for no apparent reason, no rainstorms, no nothing. The rangers were trying to figure out, you know, shutting down the roads because the creek was flooding. After the quake, Highway 9 had flooded. It was coming out of right over by Highlands Park. Mm-hmm. They have drains there now, but it breaks aquifers, so it just changed the whole pattern of water and everything going through the mountains. So anyway, I ended up going back to Cabrillo to get my grades back up and go to UC Santa Cruz because I wanted to study. I wanted to know more. I was both terrified and fascinated all at the same time. It just, the idea that Mother Earth can take this massive piece 10 miles down, take the whole thing, shove it up and north 4 feet, in just 15 seconds, it's just blows my mind. You know, the sad thing is people get hurt, but it never dampened my awe of what Earth can do. It just staggers my mind. I still follow it today. I never did get my degree for other reasons. Life took us elsewhere. I did get through it. I did study a lot. And I still keep tabs. I have a tab on my computer. It's on quakes. And I'm going, yeah, okay. And probably a little hypersensitive, probably a little weird, but it's become a kind of a hobby. I know a little more than a layman, but not enough to get my to get a job at the USGS. But
yeah, that's pretty cool though. I also had a fascination with not just earthquakes but natural disasters growing up. Watched a lot of Weather Channel as a kid, which like what kid you know, watches a lot of Weather Channel. So
Husky kids.
yeah. So I had a lot of interest in natural disasters, and now I work with emergency preparedness groups in my free time. Segue.
Very cool.
Yeah,
It doesn't always lead to bad things.
Right. Yeah. Especially, I mean, noticing things like changes in smell in creeks, and I mean, those are valuable. That's valuable knowledge. That's not something that you necessarily get from a
Being
textbook.
aware of your environment and what's going on around you is not a bad thing. And being prepared and getting like an earthquake kit or just some kind of disaster kit available is something that this whole experience that we had reinforced to me how important that was. I always carry a backpack in my car with a little bit of water, just first aid kit and that sort of thing, some flares and things, because you never really know what kind of disaster you're going to come up on the road. You never know what kind of disaster you're going to have at your house, and being prepared for just doing the basics for a day or two makes a big difference for me in my emotional stability in coping with it, because I have something that I can rely on to cope with whatever it is that's going on. And I don't have to worry until, some authority gets there to try to deal with it. I can take care of the basics myself initially.
When we moved down to Tashby, one of the things I had the real estate, we're buying a new house down there, I had them do is pull up the geological surveys. I want to know where the faults are up here. I want to know when they last moved. I looked them all up. And I guess maybe that's for my safety, maybe scientific curiosity, but partly I want to know. I want to know where these things are, and I want to know what my danger is, and I want to know what's going on. Luckily for the Ridgecrest quake, we're on bedrock, we're on granite. I like that. It just shook and stopped, and no damage. I'm going to buy all my houses on granite bedrock from now on. So help me.
Hey, if you can, why not? You mentioned earlier that you had PTSD. And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but did you ever pursue counseling, or did you know at the time that you had it, or was that sort of an afterthought?
It's sort of, the awareness developed, I think you look around and everybody's kind of jumping up and doing that too. So you think, well, I'm just normal. This is normal. For here it is. I think when it finally occurred to me that maybe it's a little deeper than that is the sirens and listening, even talking about it 30 years later, I could feel that, that bubble come up and just that tense, the sirens, it was, and I don't even really remember hearing them that much, but it's obvious they were in my subconscious. My daughter with a window, she still has trouble. She doesn't want to be near a window. She doesn't like her bed under a window. She always makes sure. So these are things that kind of follow you your whole life. Even hearing a siren today makes just kind of tense up a little bit. Especially, that volunteer big siren, the air raid siren thing. When you hear one of those, I just fall apart. But I did attempt, we had a group therapy, a group of us. I actually hired somebody, but we walked out of there. And one of the reasons is, in order to get rid of the PTSD, they wanted to do something that would erase the memories so that it wouldn't come back up for us and scare us. And we looked at each other, we said, we don't want to erase it. This is part of who we are now. And I remember getting up and walking out going, no. If that's what it means, I'll just cry for sirens.
Yeah.
Because it's part of who I am. Yeah. So, and I think time just kind of heals it. It becomes part of who we are. I mean, when we slide into home at the end of our life, we're going to have some scars and dings and cuts that's part of the adventure and the journey. You know, if I come in pristine, there's something wrong with my life.
Any final words? Great. Well, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you
It
for
was wonderful.
giving us a chance. And we'll take our little dog and go now.